So here's what we're going to be covering. I'm going to introduce myself in case we are not already acquainted. We're going to go through some relevant definitions and explanations, so building on what we just heard. We're going to talk about some notable benefits of becoming death literate at the individual level and as a society at large. We're going to talk through some reasons why it's vital for death care educators and providers to be knowledgeable, skilled, and sensitive in their delivery of this kind of information. And then I'll go into details about that training program for death literacy specialists. So to start off, my name is Francesca Lynn Arnoldy, and I call myself a community doula. I first trained as a doula back in 2009, first as a postpartum doula, helping families welcome in a new life in their transitional period after the birth. And then I trained to become a childbirth educator and taught classes for many years, both for groups and did private classes as well as sibling preparation classes. Really loved that work. Really have believed forever and ever in the value of healthy preparedness and thinking ahead, planning ahead, and surrounding yourself with really good quality, knowledgeable, sensitive support. After that, I became also a labor and birth doula. So I would work with people as they were pregnant and preparing, and then would be on call for them and would join them during their laboring and through the birth and even a little bit afterward, and then continue to check in on the family as well. Did that work very regularly for 5 or 6 years, attended about 60 to 65 births during that time. Since it's been a number of years since I have been actively working as a birth doula, but I still do continue to support people in my community and am a resource that people can turn to. Because of a number of personal losses that we experienced in my own family, it really opened my eyes and my heart to wanting to also provide support to people facing the end of life. Now, both realms, both birth and the end of life, are quite mysterious. There's so much that feels unknown. There's so much that we can't always anticipate happening or not happening. And I really have so much awe and respect for both birth and death, and even grief. And I feel so strongly that people are very deserving of being informed and well supported through both journeys. So because of those losses, I felt drawn to the field, and I became a hospice volunteer, and I still act as a hospice volunteer as my schedule allows for it. And then I created the end of life doula training programs at the University of Vermont back in 2017 and ran those for a handful of years. During that time, I began to also write. For me, writing is very cathartic and it's very clarifying. It helps me to sort of clear and cleanse anything that I'm hanging on to in my work and any of the heaviness, that residue that can build up. It also helps me wrap my head around what I have witnessed and the impact that those experiences have on me. And I figure while I'm at it, maybe not just journaling, maybe if I have stories to share, if I've learned lessons from the people that I have had the honor of serving, why not share those with other people in case it could also be beneficial? So I've published a number of books that I call death lit books, meaning they are death literature, but they're also promoting death literacy in our society and, beyond our country, just at large. Globally, they've reached an audience. So the first is Cultivating the Doula Heart, which is a short guidebook, very succinct, and goes into the essentials of compassionate care, mostly focused on end of life and grief, but highly applicable to any time of intensity, including birth as well, and other major life transitions. It's really preparing you to become a supportive presence for other people. But I always, no matter what training I'm doing, really suggest that we turn inward first, do our own work, introspection, reflection before we extend outward and support other people through their work. And we become very clear on what's ours and what is not ours. My second publication is Map of Memory Lane, which is a picture book. And this is death literacy for a younger audience. And my hope is that parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, teachers, nurses, I have some school nurses that have this, therapists, will incorporate this type of text into their library, into their office space, into their offerings, and have them available ideally to help prepare children in advance of loss, but also for times of loss and bereavement as well, to make sure that each kid has an opportunity to talk through the situation and have some language and also have a coping technique that's built into that picture book. And then my third publication is The Death Doula's Guide to Living Fully and Dying Prepared, which is a 200-page interactive workbook. So lots of space for writing and adding your own reflections, and is based off of my own death journal, which is something that I continue to work on and will be a lasting remembrance gift for my loved ones for my time of dying. So that's my death literacy library that I have published, and I really truly hope that people in the field, individuals, professionals, volunteers, advocates, educators, will put them to good use, will make good use of them. We'll use them to give talks, to run series, workshops, to have individual conversations, to run book clubs with, so that they can help spread the word and so that they feel like they have tools to use. Additionally, I mentioned hospice, and then I'm also a published researcher at the Vermont Conversation Lab, which is out of the University of Vermont, mostly focused on grief and catching grief stories, but also a little bit of psychedelics and research in that field. And I continue to teach in a number of different capacities. So not only the new training program, which I'm so proud of and I'm so excited to share with all of you and others, but I also teach for different organizations as well as part of the Open Center's thanatology program and many conferences, talks, virtual, in-person, do traveling, simply purely to spread the word, to raise awareness about this work that means so much to me. So death literacy, a little bit more about it. Death literacy means being informed. It means building a sufficient understanding of dying, death, and the care systems and options available. It means remembering that death is an expected part of being mortal. It also means acknowledging that while death is natural, sometimes the end of life comes suddenly, unexpectedly, and even tragically. As death literacy specialists, this is what you hold: the foundational knowledge, as well as a familiarity with relevant resources, care options, and services. This is a weighty responsibility. It means knowing information and also making space for the anticipated range of emotions and memories that conversations about the end of life can elicit. So it's not only literacy in the sense that we're building a language, which is important, that we're creating words, phrases, opportunities for communication. It's even deeper than that. It's deeper than words. It's deeper than language. It's about having an understanding, a knowing about our mortality, about the inevitability of our own deaths and the deaths of those that we love around us. It's acknowledging that, it's grappling with it, it's wrestling with it, it's worrying about it, it's feeling perhaps even some curiosity about it, and a whole range of other emotions that are very natural. It means re-embracing our mortality, and it means rehumanizing the end of life. It is a human experience, and it has largely become outsourced. It's largely out of our hands any longer. We are no longer familiar with the end of life and the art of caring for one another through until the end. We don't have a frame of reference. We don't know what to expect. We don't know what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. And that creates a lot of anxiety, and it creates a lot of barriers for people, a lot of hurdles to try to overcome. This not knowing is really difficult for us. So it's time to remember. And that is a main mission of spreading awareness about death literacy so that we can re-embrace the final phase of life as part of our lives. One that we don't always have to have fully positive feelings about necessarily. We don't always have to be fully accepting of even, but that we try to incorporate that knowing and the reality of it into our walk, into our contemplation, and into our planning, so that it doesn't feel quite so shocking when loss does happen in life, because it is part of it, so that we feel like we have tools, we have supports, and we have done some preparing in advance for it. So I'm not the only one who feels like this theme, this topic is quite important. There are other people who are also researching it and promoting it. So here are a couple of examples, and I share these within the course as well, the full articles for people to be able to read and reference and maybe even bring with them to events that they might be holding. So the one that says hospice news on top is from a former Mercy Health CEO who wrote a book actually about the topic and is calling us to embrace death literacy. I just want to read a couple of highlights from that. So this is really in the healthcare sector. So an expansion of death literacy is necessary to improve end-of-life care in the United States. And we would probably all argue beyond the United States, everywhere it's needed. Death used to be a family experience, and now it's a medical experience. And then goes into a lot more detail about that shift and what it has caused, because there are many implications associated with this. There are implications about us at an individual level and as patients, and also as friends, family members of people who are receiving care and people who are having to make health care decisions for themselves, and wondering, are they really reflective of who we are, who we have been, our beliefs, our values? And if we had all the information that we truly needed to make informed decisions, is that what we would be choosing for ourselves or not? Does it make sense? And then what are the financial implications as well, both individually and at large? So he states in this, the remedy to this, complex issue is really education and reflection. There's so much needed. It talks about dying people being in the ICU and really questioning if that is the correct place for people to be dying, or if that is a reflection of our reluctance to admit that dying does in fact happen. And also about advanced directives and vagueness, and if they're going to truly be applicable, if they're even in place. So much to question around there about death literacy. The other one is talking about the school system. So we have the healthcare sector and then also school systems, and a call for inclusion of death education within school curriculum. So looking at it, as I was talking about my picture book, thinking about reaching even younger people. So this study is calling for a significant overhaul in the way education about human death is approached within schools, advocating for its inclusion as a vital component of the curriculum. Talking about how teachers feel like they often lack the time and the training to be able to address these issues in advance of loss and maybe serious illness or a terminal diagnosis that one of their students' loved ones is perhaps facing. And then after a loss does occur and a student or students are experiencing grief and how to support that. So at so many different levels, at the level of training our teachers and preparing them, because this is really about, death education is life education, and it is very life affirming to consider preparing for the end of it. So it's both preparing the teachers in advance and then the teachers being able to prepare their students in advance and then supporting them through times of difficulty. So just a couple highlights here. By incorporating education about death into the curriculum, we can empower school communities to proactively address bereavement rather than reacting to it. We know from speaking to young people that this would be better for them as well as the teachers. The study further highlights the detrimental impact of bereavement on young individuals, often leading to loss of self-awareness and uncertainty about their future. With current strains on the healthcare system, accessing timely counseling for bereaved children poses additional challenges. So yes, it's amazing and really important to have those layers of mental health support available for children, but also just at large for everyone to be able to access basic death literacy curriculum within schools is hugely important and beneficial. And lastly, I don't have this one shown, but there's another research article from Progress in Palliative Care called Developing Death Literacy. And this includes some interesting explanations of death literacy and also its importance. So in here, they similarly define it as a set of knowledge and skills that make it possible to gain access to understand and act upon end-of-life and death care options. People and communities with high levels of death literacy have context-specific knowledge about the death system and the ability to put that knowledge into practice. Positioned within a public health framework, death literacy is considered an outcome of people's experiences of and learning about death and dying. Death literacy also appears to be a resource that individuals and communities can use for their own benefit, strengthening their capacity for future caring. So this really references not only is the information delivery of death literacy important, but also recognizing the benefits of that hands-on lived experience through loss that we tend to carry, which becomes our frame of reference that we carry forward. Now, as a death literacy specialist, we not only are sharing useful, beneficial information and resources, we are creating spaces for this type of communication to happen, in which we invite people to reflect back and talk about what has been your personal experience with loss. What losses have you endured? What do you carry with you? What grief are you continuing to grieve in your days? And have a space to talk that through with other people, not in the sense that it's a grief support group formally, but it's a space to talk about and normalize this experience, because it's a very human experience and it's universal, and loss comes in so many different forms, even beyond the loss of, caused by death. Thinking about losses of relationships and different transitions in life, different milestones, endings of relationships or careers, or a marriage, or moving to a different place, leaving a home behind. So many different types of loss, and we very rarely have opportunities to talk about that and share about that and process that with other people, and know that other people are also going through things that are perhaps similar, and that our experience might also be unique and in its own way, and be deserving of having a compassionate, supportive response to it. So death literacy, as we mentioned, is the knowledge of life's final phase and the available death care options. And I believe that death literacy, some of the benefits associated with it would be that information can allay anxiety. When we don't know, the unknown can feel very intimidating, and it can create a lot of anxiety. We can feel really fearful, very anxious in the face of what we don't know. So if we can gain access to information, that usually helps us feel more calm, more prepared, and we have more of a frame of reference going in. Preparation can lessen stress. So in addition to anxiety and lowering anxiety, it can also lessen stress, because a lot of these experiences can feel very overwhelming for many, many reasons. So anything we can do to try to lower that amount of overwhelm is beneficial to everyone involved, including the caregivers, including the clinicians, and the people who are actually directly navigating the experience. Awareness can encourage a sense of agency and also connection. So as a death literacy specialist, as a doula, I always want to promote that sense of empowerment. I want to lift up the voices of the people that I'm supporting and caring for. And I want them to feel like they're still directing the course. They are in the lead. I am companioning, and we always strive for person-centered care, person-directed care. It is so hugely important. And for most of us who are familiar with the end of life, a terminal diagnosis often renders people quite dependent on others, and they are continuing to experience loss after loss in terms of abilities, perhaps, or roles, or identities, or relationships. And we want to make sure that we still are providing opportunities for choice, for decision making, and for making sure that their voice is heard, recognized, and respected. People have the right to be active participants in their care journeys. So as death literacy specialists, it's our ongoing responsibility. So this is not something that we sort of check a box and complete. It's ongoing. To be familiar with the dying process, the death care system, and any available related resources and beneficial services to enable us to effectively assist others in their journeys. We don't always have to be the direct source, but we are the bridge to those options, and people don't know what they don't know. So we have to be well informed ourselves, well resourced, well networked, so that we can act as that bridge to make sure that people are able to get all of the layers of support that they could benefit from. We need to be informed and also aware. Vital sensitivities are a huge part of the death literacy specialist training program. I cannot stress this enough. It is so important that we are sensitive when we are within this realm. For some of us, we have been able to become quite comfortable with the end of life and with talking about it, with discussing it, with bringing it up. And that can sometimes lead us to forget that for other people, this can feel really intimidating. They could be really fearful of even saying the word death or dying, and maybe about talking about their fears or worries or hopes or past experiences. That can feel really intense, and it can really provoke a lot of emotion inside of them that might even surprise them. They might not even be aware of how much they're holding. And so we need to be mindful of that when we're broaching these topics, whether it's in conversation with someone, or perhaps it's leading a workshop or an event or a talk. We want to make sure that these spaces feel safe and welcoming to people. So we go into a lot of detail about that. Within the course, I want to tell you that not only is it me speaking about these topics and me pulling together these lessons that cover a huge variety of topics, I'm going to go into more details in a minute. It's also hearing from people who have completed my trainings and who are out in the world, out in their communities, sharing their offerings and their experiences with putting it into practice, their experience with implementing and customizing and working through any hiccups and challenges and finding their way to their successes within their communities. So I have within the course a library of these recorded interviews that I have done with people who are acting in this capacity as death literacy specialists, which is really powerful for learners coming through who want to see themselves, want to see that potential for themselves moving forward. Sometimes people ask if there's a difference between this training and other training programs. As I mentioned, I created the end-of-life doula programs at the University of Vermont and ran those for a number of years. And I also teach within the thanatology program very regularly. And I also teach my own workshops and things. This is different. And the way that I've set it up is that it could either be for somebody who has completed a program in the field, maybe a death doula training program, maybe something in thanatology, maybe a hospice volunteer training program, and next steps. They're looking for now what? Because most of us, after we completed that, we quickly realized there aren't jobs waiting for us at the end of it. We have to create our jobs in this field. And so part of the goal of this program is to enable people to establish themselves within their community. And if they are already established in some way, in some capacity, then to elevate that role within the community. Also, for people who haven't maybe entered the field yet, this could be a good starting place for you. And you might get to know the field, get to know death literacy, the dying process, and be starting at that level. So I have catered the curriculum with both learners in mind, people who are experienced and trained and who are looking for the next step, and people who are just getting into this field and are looking for where to start. It's really applicable for both. And I give people different instructions based on where they're at and where they can go next. Is it necessary to take this training? No. As I mentioned, this work is human work. Just as I taught birth classes because that is a human experience, and just as I teach death education because it is a human experience. Not everyone will need to take this program to be able to share about death literacy. It is not required. If you in your own work, in your own self, feel like you have all you need in terms of the confidence, the courage, the skills, the approaches, and the content, the programming content that you need to be able to do this work and operate within this role, then thank you. And I applaud you and I wish you the best. And please consider using my death literacy publications as you move forward. If, however, you feel like you are seeking community, you are seeking support, one-on-one with me, somebody who's been in the field, who has a lot of experience in this realm and has quite a bit to offer to other people. Also, your colleagues in this field who have a shared mission. If you are looking for more courage, more confidence to get up in front of people to share about this topic, if you are looking for more sensitivities and skills to be able to do it in a way that's going to be received well by your audience, whether it's an audience of 1 or it's an audience of 1,000, 10 or 100, or anything in between, and you are seeking content, really enriching, impactful, meaningful, well-built content, then that's what this program has to offer you. Thank you for your interest in death literacy. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing in your community, whether it's formal, informal, professional, volunteer, paid, unpaid. There is such a need. It is a vital, essential need for us in our communities. And I recognize I am only one person and I can only reach so many people. And together we can really expand our reach and our impact. And I'll just leave you with the firm belief I have that we are not in competition with one another, that we are in community with one another. And I really respect and embrace all of your efforts and your specific gifts that you bring into the world. So let me know if you have any additional questions. I'm easy to find, easy to reach, and I hope we stay connected.